a sun sacrifice. And now you know why the soldier Eminem has the sun behind him in the rye fields. And a sergeant is one who serves. And a general is a Gen-Ra-El. And now you know why war is Ra backwards. And that's why we have religion, the Re Legion, which means the Legion of the Sun God, Re. And our politicians are also entertainers, political jesters, fulfilling their oath to the agenda of death. And that's why the 1943 Chevrolet logo shows you the horns, the satanic horns of the horned beast. In witchcraft, the high priestess or the goddess holds the highest power. And that's why we have the red-haired Titan Queen Elizabeth. Because the female is the king in witchcraft and paganism. So now you know why we haven't had a real king since the 1700s. And every logo has a dualistic meaning, the obverse and the reverse, the obvious and the unknown. And that's why the V also stands for the female vagina. All boats and vehicles are considered female. And that's why their enginas or engines are V's. And that's why they're called a vagina vulva, which is a V engine valve. And that's why Volvo shows you both the male and the female, because Volvo comes from the Latin vulva, that means vagina, sex magic. And that's why the penis piston head strokes the shaft up and down. And that's why all vessels and cars have the female hole, along with the lips or the lid. And that's why the sacred fluid pumps into the female. But remember, it won't work unless you shove it all the way in. And now you know why it's called a dipstick. Just like when you use an electric socket. The ancient primordial mound creation myth piercing the black chaos of the watery abyss. Because 9/11 was a satanic sex magic ritual. Did you know the Jewish Colonization Association began on September 11th? And it was the Dutch from the Netherlands that created the New Amsterdam that we call Manhattan, as in the Royal Dutch Shell Oil Company. And the Dutch discovered Manhattan Island on September 11th and established it as a trade center in 1613. And now you know why New York is full of crazy people, because New York, or Manhattan, is the Mad Hatter or the Manhattan. Just like on your birthday when you light the candle and then you make a wish and then you blow it out and burn the candle or the pillar to the ground. It's called spell casting, the spell of El. And that's why the Illuminati made talismans that we used and gave power to their dream. And their wish for a new world order came true. And that's why they burned the candles to the ground. And that's why they used alchemy and the shape-shifting sex magic to create the new World Trade Center. And Building 7 was named the Solomon Building, as in King Solomon and his magic Solomon seal and his golden ring, which is the symbol of the sun. And King Solomon worshipped the horned beast Baal. And just like a piston of an engine, King Solomon's temple is set up like sex magic, the female and the male, in and out. And Washington, D.C. is set up like King Solomon's sex temple. And right where the altar of sacrifice is right where our state capital is, right in the mid-L of the belly of the beast, the owl or the Moloch. Because the U.S. cap of L is where we send our children to be sacrificed in war.
I'm a war president. I make decisions here in the Oval Office in foreign policy matters with war on my mind.
And they want us to believe Arabs are the enemy. But the real enemy is you. The Roman Apollo, or the Greek Helios, was the sun, which gives us the forbidden fruit of the apple. And Apollo, the sun god, uses the instrument of the lyre. Why do you think they call it the lyre? Because it's all a lie. Because those are the horns of the horned beast, the ancient Egyptian horned sun, the golden calf of fornication, the bull god, El of the Bible. Notice the tree or the pillar and the serpent. Notice Apollo the sun and his twin pillars, exactly like Solomon and his twin pillars. The sun pillars of the Manhattan hinge. In the east, where the sun rises. Why do you think Abraham was going to sacrifice his son, but sacrificed the lamb or the ram instead? Because Abraham was making a sacrifice to the sun. When the sun starts in the first house of the zodiac, Aries, the ram, the Ra-am, named after the sun. And that's why Abraham's name means father, son, ram. Abraham, the first seed of the bloodline. So now you know why it's called Ram. And now you know why they call it Rambo, the first blood. Because the ram is the first. And that's why Rambo shows the clock set at 9:11. And they show the two towers with the clock in the middle, the 101. Like going back to the first pillars of Adam and Eve and the apple. And that's why 101 is elementary, going back to the basics for the dummies. And now you know why the birth of your new checking account is 101. And that's why the Illuminati used their pillar of sacrifice, the altar of sacrifice. And that's why they're laughing out loud. And that's why the death cult tries to scare you with the apocalypse or the rapture. And just like the Y2K scare, they have the 2012 scare. And let's not forget the global warming scare. But Belle, Eve, me, there's no global warming. The Earth's core is made of molten lava, and the crust rides on top of the surface. It's called plate tectonics, or the continental drift. So, what was once a beautiful ocean will someday be an ugly, dried-up desert. Just look at how drastic the changes are in one day, let alone a week or a month or a year. But what is the real scientific data of global warming? I mean, the Earth has roughly been around for 4.5 billion years. And if we zoom in to the past 5 million years when mankind started, we find it wasn't until the 1600s that the first thermometer was created by Galileo. So the first thermometer was created over 400 years ago, but they were not put into production until the 1900s. So thermometers have only been mass-produced for 100 years. I mean, think about how many thermometers there were across the world in the 1600s or the 17 or 1800s. So 100 years of data in geological time is not reliable data. And get this, the highest temperatures ever recorded in history occurred almost 100 years ago. And the International Calibration Standard didn't begin until 1990. So there's no global warming, and there's certainly no apocalypse coming, because an apocalypse means the Apollo eclipse, or the eclipse of the sun, Apollo, the sun god. And that's why the story comes from the book of Revelations. Because the sun revolves around the earth to the ancients. So, when the sun went to the underworld at night, or when the sun ended its annual cycle at the end of the year, They would scare people into making sacrifices so that the cold winter would go away and God's Son would return and bring a fruitful harvest for the village. Because the sun just revolves around the earth, and making sacrifices has nothing to do with a good harvest. And when the sun and the moon aligned, which is known as an eclipse today, it seemed as though the male and the female, or the moon and the sun, were having sex. So since ancient times, the royal leaders always used the eclipse as a way to scare the people into submission. And that's why they tell you there's going to be a rapture, which is a raw aperture, like the aperture of your camera. Again, we're just talking about a sunlight eclipse.